It's yet another movie based on an old 60s show, except unlike the last few times we did it, this one was actually meant to be serious. We're talking about 1998's Lost in Space.
T-minus 1 minute and counting.
Major, she's all yours.
Mission Control, this is Jupiter 1. The Robinsons are all tucked in. We are ready to fly.
The time has come.
The Robinson family will travel.
I wonder what it'll be like to jettison your body into deep space. Do they have a name for what's wrong with you?
Wait up, wait!
Beyond the frontiers of adventure.
Cool.
To find their way home.
Get us airborne.
Hang on!
Lost in Space.
The last few times we've tried talking about movies like this, they usually tried turning them into comedies. We talked about Chips, and before that, Land of the Lost, and also before that was Banana Splits, but they tried making that into a horror comedy. This one, on the other hand, they took this cheesy old 60s sci-fi show and tried to turn it into a super serious, legitimate, action-packed summer blockbuster. Fast and furious space adventure in which a dying Earth depends on one all-American family for its salvation. On their way to console a new world, the family runs into some unexpected problems. Soon, they find themselves lost in space, with little more than a psychotic villain and a variety of unwholesome aliens for company. 5.2 out of 10 on IMDb, 27% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's sad when even Rotten Tomatoes, which is owned by Warner Brothers, can't give this movie that's technically owned by Warner Brothers a better rating. The most interesting fact I learned while on IMDb looking up some things about the movie after it was over was finding out that this movie apparently knocked Titanic off #1 after like 15 weeks of Titanic being #1 at the box office. This movie somehow finally put that to a stop. I don't know how that's possible, but apparently it really happened. So much like Land of the Lost, this show is basically just about a family that ends up getting stuck and a bunch of science fiction adventures happen from there. But in Land of the Lost, it was about a father with his son and daughter who end up taking a wrong turn during a rafting trip, and they end up in the Land of the Lost, which is this like prehistoric crossroads of stuff from like the future and the past, like dinosaurs, and also like beings out of Greek mythology and alien lizard men like the Sleek Stack and primitive monkey type of men. My mom was a fan of the show, so I asked her a little bit about it, and she said that the names of the characters were all the same. A lot of the same kind of dynamics were in play. You know, they also had a robot sidekick. Dr. Smith was kind of a cowardly antagonist type figure, and the family, the Robinsons, were supposed to be modeled after Swiss Family Robinson, except in space. And they were floating around. They ended up getting stuck in some kind of wormhole or something, and they ended up getting lost in space. So now they go from planet to planet, and every episode was a science fiction adventure of the week where they go on different planets and come across different weird things. So then, in the 90s, in the grand tradition of let's take things from the past and revamp them for modern ages, which there was a lot of that in the 90s. I mean, you know, there were old shows that were being turned into movies like SWAT and Dragnet, the Brady Bunch movie, except that was actually really funny. Much like stuff like Chips and Land of the Lost, they essentially tried to stay true to the original plot of the source material, but obviously they tried to ramp it up like crazy, because right away there's this opening narration where they explain that in the future, this is like 2050 or something, they say that all terrorism from the world is just gone. And now, in that year, you know, world peace has basically been achieved.
The warring nations of Earth had forgotten their differences and banded together to save our planet.
But immediately after they say that, they then say that, oh, well, now there's this underground terrorist organization that want to bring upon chaos and anarchy.
Terrorist forces calling themselves the Global Sedition were preparing to strike.
And weirdly enough, the movie it reminded me of was The Host, because that was a movie we did a video on for Blockbusters years ago. But The Host, which was, yes, based on a book by the same chick that wrote the Twilight books, but that pretty much did the same thing. The movie of The Host begins with a narration saying that, oh, you know, world peace has been achieved, except in that movie it was because aliens invaded Earth and started taking over human bodies, so now there would be, you know, just complete unity, and any kind of humans are basically, like, fending for themselves out in the desert somewhere. So this movie tries to take it in a different approach in that, oh, it's in a future where world peace has been achieved, but now some rebellious terrorist organization is trying to, you know, bring that to an end. And we see one of the characters, I forget the guy's name, Major Dawn, I think was his name. I'm just going to call him Joey throughout this review because he's played by Matt LeBlanc, which is another thing that's from a previous Blockbuster show review. Because I talked about Ed, the movie where it was him playing baseball with a chimpanzee. It's hard to say if this is a better or worse career move. One thing I can say is that throughout this entire movie, I just had this feeling that either Matt LeBlanc himself or his agent were like, dude, you're on a sitcom, you're supposed to be the token funny guy on that show, so we gotta try and give you something new, something different, so you're gonna play action hero for this movie. And I'll give Matt LeBlanc this, he's at least trying. I don't know if he really succeeded, because the entire time I'm just like, that's just Joey from Friends.
Showtime.
Will say he does a better job than some of the other actors here. Like William Hurt plays John Robinson. He's like the husband and father of the Robinson family. And I don't know what it is, man, but he is boring in this film.
Alpha Prime is the only other habitable planet yet detected by Deep Space Recon.
It's like they read the script and the director or the producer or writer or whatever told them, hey, you're supposed to be the serious character. You're supposed to be stoic throughout this movie. And he just goes completely emotionless the entire time. Another bad sci-fi movie it reminded me of that we did a Blockbusters video on years ago was After Earth. Like how Will Smith's character in that movie acts. He just acts stoic, and it's like he's doing a Morgan Freeman voice throughout the whole movie. That is the same way I felt every time William Hurt was on screen. He is fucking boring in this film. He just sucks all the air out of the room. It's sad when the robot has more of an emotional connection to the audience than he does. Maureen Robinson, I forget her name, but they don't really give her a whole lot to do in the movie. Especially doesn't show with those two. I mean, they're supposed to be a husband and wife. They have zero chemistry whatsoever. Especially one scene near the end of the movie. You know, they're heading off to try and find this big thing that's going to help them off this one planet, and he gives the most cold, deadest performance with this one line.
Come home to me, Professor.
I love you, wife.
I love you, wife. He doesn't even call her by her name. It's a shitty line with a shitty line delivery. Everything about that just sucked. And then you get to their kids. Their oldest daughter, Judy, she's played by Heather Graham, weirdly enough, and according to what I was able to find out, this continues from the original show because I guess Judy was supposed to be in love with the Major, Don, or whatever his name is, Joey. So they try to build off of that in this thing where you have Joey and Judy like interacting with one another. They have this like on again, off again kind of chemistry.
I've read about you. You're a war hero, aren't you?
Well, yes, actually.
Who was it who said those who can't think, fight?
So embarrassing. And I think the worst part of it is when they first start to establish like, oh, they have banter back and forth, they have awkward chemistry, they're eventually going to get together. You want to see those two crazy kids end up together at the end of this thing. The most awkward thing about these interactions is that her dad is his boss, and he's right there when he's having this awkward banter with his daughter.
Is there room in these tubes for two?
There's barely enough for you and your ego, Major.
Hey, don't sweat it, Doc. I do this all the time.
So like every time those two interacted and William Hurt just like looks over like, It is the most uncomfortable thing every time. The only other thing I can think of in relation to Heather Graham's character, Judy, the thing that makes me laugh is that she's supposed to be a scientist, and movie, I'm sorry, like the rest of America, whenever I think of Heather Graham, I'm always going to think of her as Roller Girl. I'm sorry, I know she was giving it her all, she was really trying to act in this thing, but I'm sorry. Heather Graham as a scientist, I believe that as much as I believe, I don't know, Matt LeBlanc as an action hero. It's like, you know, they're really trying to give it their all with the really shitty material they were given, but I don't believe it. And there's Penny, who's their middle kid, the younger of the two daughters, and the only thing of note is that she's played by Lacey Chabert.
I don't want to leave early. You know, I don't want to go at all.
We will discuss this at dinner.
For the last 3 years, I've missed everything. Training, so I could spend the next 10 years missing everything else.
Every time she was on screen, I was just thinking, I'm sorry, you know, you could try to give her this like spunky, you know, oh, she don't give no shits kind of attitude, but I'm like, dude, I don't buy it. Every time she says a line, I'm just thinking, that's Eliza Thornberry, man.
As part of her enslavement, the brave young space captive, Penny Robinson, is forced to utilize her dazzling.
As for their youngest kid, Will Robinson, he's supposed to be the youngest of their kids, but, you know, despite being a little boy, he's a tech genius because he's able to hack into a bunch of different robotics and computers, and he's able to manifest all this incredible stuff, and he's just a young kid. And how they establish this is the mom has like a video hologram conference call with his teacher, and he starts messing around with the hologram and making her change shape while they're talking, and he like makes her turn into like a cartoon general and a gorilla.
Will is terribly gifted.
The changing shape of education.
His little time machines, though pure fancy, are the products of a truly brilliant mind.
No more monkey business. I mean it.
And of course you get to Dr. Smith, and here Dr. Smith is played by Gary Oldman, which, this is fascinating to find out, Gary Oldman was also in Quest for Camelot the same year that this movie came out, from the same studio. I mean, granted, that was put out by Warner Brothers, and this was put out by New Line Cinema, but Warner Brothers owns New Line Cinema. So yeah, Gary Oldman basically plays the exact same character in the fact that he's playing an obvious villain that people seem to trust for no real reason, despite the fact the characters constantly point out how obviously evil the guy is.
The sedition hired me to provide access to Daniel's apartment, and no more. My work is done.
In this movie, you have it that Dr. Smith is working for this terrorist organization that they established in the opening monologue and the opening action scene, where Joey and a couple of his fellow space soldiers are shooting at guys. The entire thing just felt like something out of one of the Star Wars prequels. It really did. All it was missing was young Jake Lloyd Anakin Skywalker going, "This is tense!" Anyway, yeah, the terrorist organization is who Dr. Smith, Gary Oldman's character, works for, and they end up telling him that they don't really need him anymore, but he's already on the ship because he was supposed to sabotage the Robinsons' plan. This is obviously going to be the mission that ends up landing them lost in space. But, you know, they're put into these cryogenic freezing chambers. He ends up sneaking on board the ship. He ends up waking them up, and the robot shows up to try and kill the Robinson family. But little old Will Robinson is able to reprogram the robot, and apparently it's the same voice actor who voiced the robot in the original show. That's at least what it said on IMDb. But the robot, they clearly wanted this thing to look a lot cooler, because you look at the robot in the original show, it looks like something out of a 60s TV show, because it was. But the robot in this one, they tried to make it look cooler and awesome, and the entire time it was on screen, I was just like, oh, you know that they would have made toys for that. Like, if this movie was a little more popular, I'm willing to believe they would have made action figures or, like, Happy Meal toys based on some of these things, especially that robot, and especially another character we're going to get to in a second. But yeah, the robot starts off as bad, but Will Robinson reprograms it, so now the robot is loyal to the family, specifically Will. And of course, you know at some point in the movie they have to have it say, "Danger, Will Robinson."
Destroy all systems. Destroy Robinson family.
The children!
So after the robot is reprogrammed and the family are considering what to do with the stowaway, Dr. Smith, the only person who hasn't woken up from their cryogenic sleep is Judy, so he tries to help her come back, but it seems that she's still stuck. She's still knocked out. And it doesn't help that their ship is being pulled in by the sun's gravitational pull, so, you know, they're going to have to find a way out of this mess quick. And the solution that they come to is, I'm just going to call it going to hyperdrive. You know, they go super fast, time temporarily freezes, and it looks like they were trying to copy effects from The Matrix. Just a year before The Matrix was actually released, but still, it's like a really shitty version of bullet time in that movie. But their ship ends up going like a million light years like into the future, and now they're just floating around in space with no real target or way of getting home because it seems that they're just lost in space.
Star maps of all the known galaxy.
I don't recognize a single system.
We're lost.
Eventually, Judy comes to. They lock Dr. Smith in the brig of the ship, and while floating around trying to find any kind of means of communication, they come across another ship, and it turns out the ship, allegedly, has no other beings on board. But they decide that they're going to go onto the ship to try and see if there's any kind of sign of life or anything that can help them possibly find a planet that can help them get in contact with Earth or any kind of form of civilization. And for whatever reason, they decide to take Dr. Smith with them after a scene where Matt LeBlanc holds him at gunpoint and says that he doesn't trust him and says that he'll even try to find a reason to shoot him.
You're coming with us.
Out of the question. I am a doctor, not a space explorer.
No, what you are is a murderous saboteur. And I am not leaving you on this ship so you can do more harm than you've already caused. Absolutely confused. Give me an excuse to kill you.
And all throughout this movie, they constantly say that they don't trust him or that they don't like him, but they still take him around places. So they get onto this other ship, and they find this old video feed that shows one of Joey's fellow space soldiers, and it turns out that this ship was once piloted by them, but it seems that there's no more life on it, except for some weird plants growing on certain parts of the ship, and they come across the other totally marketable character. They end up naming it Blarp because it's a vaguely cute sci-fi kind of sounding name. And the CG on it is terrible. Like I said earlier, there's a bunch of things in this movie that reminded me of not just shitty summer blockbusters from Roland Emmerich with like the quippy dialogue and the one-liners here and there, but there was also a bunch of stuff and I'm like, man, this just reminds me that a year after this came out, Phantom Menace was around the corner, so seeing that thing, I was just like, oh, yep, there we go. There's the token cute character that if this movie was even more marketed, they probably would have made toys out of that. Even though when they first, came in contact with the ship, they said there was no life aboard, but apparently there is life aboard, not just with the space monkey thing, but they also have these, like, freaky little spider creatures that are like, they're kind of like giant crabs, but they're supposed to be spiders. And they're just crawling around the place and they start attacking the characters. The characters run. This is one of the many scenes where Joey shows off how much of a badass he is because he like has this special armor and just starts like shooting at them and laying waste to them. Also, Will ends up using this special technology where he takes over the robot by controlling it with this like hologram like thing. It looks like the things you see inside of like Iron Man's helmet, and he's just like controlling the robot to like try and shoot at these things and help Matt LeBlanc take them out. Matt LeBlanc ends up blowing up the ship after they get on board their ship and fly out of there, and Dr. Smith gets bitten by one of the spiders, and this comes into play into the movie's third act. Oh my god, we're gonna get to that in a second. Because Joey blew up the other ship and they end up crashing on a foreign planet that's covered in snow and ice, and the ship's computers temporarily go out. Because of that decision, William Hurt and Joey have this spat back and forth where he's clearly mad that, you know, one of his own men was willing to blow up a giant ship just because, ooh, he didn't like them spiders. That was another thing. There was like some stupid line that Joey says. It's like, I hate spiders. And I'm like, you're not Indiana Jones, all right? You're fucking Joey from Friends in a fucking Lost in Space movie. Lacey Chabert and the space monkey are, you know, becoming friendlier with one another. You know, oh, this is the part where one of the kid characters bonds with the cute animal sidekick. And you also have Joey and Judy having their lovers quarrel, kind of like they're having one of their many awkward back and forths, and they're talking to one another. And I can only imagine this was Warner Brothers jacking themselves off and trying to promote other Warner Brothers things.
That's how the constellations were born. Porky the Wise and Mighty Pig.
The great big-eared bunny, Bugs.
So apparently this movie is so far in the future, people have treated Looney Tunes characters like they're Greek mythology or some shit. The only thing that was reminding me of was Sleepy Cabin podcast, because there was an episode where they were talking about like a hypothetical where maybe someday in the future Pokemon would become its own religion. And that was what it was making me think of. It's like, oh, so in the future we're going to talk about Looney Tunes characters like we talk about Homer's Odyssey and shit like that. We're treating them like they're idols of the past, really? Like I said, I can only imagine that was Warner Brothers jacking themselves off and being like, oh man, we're Warner Brothers, we're referencing stuff that we own. So the next day, out of nowhere, there's this whole character dynamic that's introduced where Will says that he hates that his dad isn't there for him or his family. He cares more about his work and all that, and he storms off in a huff. And once again, William Hurt just looks so bored. Like, his son is supposed to be mad at him and storms off on him while they're on some foreign alien planet they don't know. And he's just so, like, the entire time. It's like, can you at least try to give a fraction of a shit?
You never listen to me. Not ever.
William Hurt and Joey decide to go off on the planet to see if they can find whatever is causing this big anomaly, because that's one of the things that's, you know, wrecking this planet that they're on. There's some kind of anomaly going on, and the anomaly turns out to be a Will Robinson from the future who lost his family on this planet, and he created a time machine so that he can go back and stop all that from happening.
Recognize me. I'm your son, Will.
And there's also a future Dr. Smith, and because he was bitten by the spider creatures from earlier, he is now this big blue-faced spider creature. Because, I mean, they showed that the spiders have, like, blue venom that leak out, or blue blood, or something that leaks out from them. But yeah, Gary Oldman's face is CG'd on this terrible looking like spider human creature, and he has like a cloak on, and he was fucking chewing the scenery, man. He was chewing that scenery like it was dinner. Like, he is just going all out, going on about, like, you know, how he wants to take over the world with spiders and a master race, and we're going to take over everything.
Within these eggsets grow the seeds of a master race of spiders. We shall descend upon helpless Earth, an entire planet to rule, an entire planet on which to feed.
If this movie gave us one thing, it was Gary Oldman having fun in the last act. That was the closest thing to enjoyable about this movie for me. The rest of it was just kind of generic, big budget, summer sci-fi movie. But I gotta say, Gary Oldman hamming it up in the last act kind of made it worth it. Meanwhile, present Dr. Smith and present little boy Will end up coming across all of this. Evil future spider Dr. Smith ends up throwing present day Dr. Smith off of like a high platform and killing him. And why that doesn't just erase this evil spider Dr. Smith out of existence, I don't fucking know. But, you know, at this point, this is when Will realizes that this Dr. Smith is evil and can't be trusted. And there's this, I forgot about this, there's this stupid moment where the future version of the robot is now evil again and holds them all like prisoner. And, well, then the little boy Will convinces the robot to have a heart and stop thinking based on programming and instead, you know, the magic of friendship and, you know, look inside your heart.
Us now, robot. Because we're friends.
Logic error. Friendship does not compute.
Just forget logic. Act with your heart.
Robot has no heart. Robot is powered by a fusion pulse generator.
Every living thing has a heart.
It was something out of a fucking Care Bears special, I swear. Everyone tries flying off the planet, but their ship ends up exploding because it crashes in a, like, meteor shower, or, like, it gets hit by large debris because the planet is about to explode, basically. Crazy future Will, who's all grown up, and William Hurt, who was, like, the only person that wasn't on the ship. They go back in time just a couple seconds to stop the evil spider CG Dr. Smith. They take Dr. Smith with them on the ship, and they're about to fly off. And they even tell future Will to come with them, but he's like, no, the time machine can only send one person, and it can only be used once.
Come with us! I can't! Only enough power for one person, one trip, remember?
Considering future technology, it's a science fiction movie. You make a time machine from scratch after all those years, and the time machine only works once? What a fucking shitty time machine. It can only work once, and it can only take one person, really? It's like Skynet's technology in the first Terminator movie was better than that shit. Whatever, they managed to get off the planet safely and not get killed in explosions and crushed by debris and whatnot. And, well, they're still trying to figure out how to get back home, and so they fly off, and that's Lost in Space, 1998.
Getting Alpha Prime.
I hope.
Initiate now.
Cool.
Is it one of the worst movies I've ever sat through for Blockbusters? No. In fact, if anything, I hate to say it, but this is probably one of the better movies based on an old 60s show, because it wasn't as annoying as Land of the Lost or Chips, which were trying way too hard to be funny. You know, one was relying too much on Will Ferrell being Will Ferrell and doing Will Ferrell shtick, and the other was just loaded with a bunch of bad ad-lib and just felt like the poor man's attempt at copying 21 Jump Street, and it has way better production value than the Banana Splits horror movie, that's for sure. But otherwise, the entire movie is just a generic sci-fi movie. None of the performances really stand out, aside from Gary Oldman in the last act. He was going ham on that. But, like, really, no one really does a great job. I mean, it is kind of funny to see Matt LeBlanc try to do a, like, you know, tough action hero lead type of character. But the dialogue's pretty bad. The story is really non-existent. It just kind of meanders along. Like, after the first 20 minutes or so, like, when they actually do end up in space, it just kind of feels like, you know, like a lot of these kind of big budget sci-fi movies. Oh, we go from checkpoint to checkpoint. Okay, now we're going on to this other ship that's filled with these spider creatures. Okay, well, now we're off the ship. Now we crash land on a planet. And I guess to an extent, maybe that's what the original show was like, but with way less budget and a lot more sillier shit in it. Oh god, the cover song they have during the ending credits of the Lost in Space theme, it's edited like a fucking shitty music video from the 90s. It's like quick cuts and like seizure-inducing flashing effects and stuff. It's like, this is how you end your movie? I don't know. Me personally, I just don't see any reason to watch this movie again. It's like, well, already sat through it. Don't really have any desire to watch it again. And if I wanted to rewatch the scenes with Gary Oldman, people probably clipped that into oblivion of him going, you know, master race of spiders. You know what's sad, though? This movie probably has way more going on in it compared to what we're talking about next time. Next time on Blockbuster Show, we're going to be talking about a shitty, straight-to-video sci-fi horror film from 2012 called Aliens vs. Avatars. Not only is it trying to rip off the success of the Alien vs. Predator movies, but it's also trying to copy the success of 2 James Cameron alien sci-fi films with Aliens and Avatar. But until then, I'm Am Sykes of the Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.
My family is on this ship, and you will follow my orders, whether you agree with them or not. Is that clear, Major?
Hey, save your speeches. I like you.